Hello everyone, planning rubric 5. Essential question here, how do the informal and formal assessments monitor children's multimodal learning and language and literacy? Alright, and then I'm not going to read this entire question, but I want you to notice the keywords. How do they align? Your score is going to be looking how this aligns to the standards and objectives. How your assessments align to the standards and objectives. You want to make sure that you are assessing what you said you were going to assess. And important, if you have students with an IEP or 504, how are you going to adapt the lesson plans in the learning segment to meet their needs, or how are you going to make accommodations? And your assessment should provide evidence of children's language and literacy development. What are you going to do to provide evidence and that actively demonstrate their learning? So you provide evidence in your context for learning, both required support and modifications, which you guys filled out. That last section, if there was a 504 student or a student with an IEP, you filled that out and added some strategies that you're going to use. And planning commentary and prompt 5. Remember, this is task 1. And your assessment materials, remember, you're going to turn them in blank at first, and then after the students actually do it, you're going to have it filled out and collected, and you can grade it, write on it, just like you do normally as a teacher. And then the scorer is going to review your lesson plans and look for these things. Look for evidence of children's language and literacy development through one or more modality. So, let's say you're thinking of kinesthetic learning, or how are they active, or is it visual? How are you providing different support for children's learning of language and literacy, okay, in your lesson? All right. Okay, and then we get on here. An automatic 1, which remember, we're shooting for 3 right off the bat. We'll get into that in a second, but you're going to get a 1 if you don't include any information about the IEPs or 504s. So you have to include that. But if it's not applicable with the students or classroom that you're teaching, then this is not, you don't need that in this particular section. All right, and then you're going to start at a 3. And if you look here, it gives you where you're going to start. So to get a 3, if you get a 3, you would have provided evidence for one or more modality of the children's learning of language and literacy at various points within the learning segment. All right, and do your assessments gather evidence of learning related to the central focus? It can be informative, summative, or both. The evidence that you collect by the assessment is explained, and the determination of how the candidate will be able to monitor children's learning is not left up to the scorer. Basically, what are you going to do next based on what you learn about what the students know and can do from your lesson? What is your next step as a teacher? All right, and then you got on here, and below 3, we're not focusing on that. It gives you some information about an automatic score of a 1. But then this is where I want you to look after you read that part that I just went over to yourself. This is how you get above a 3. You provide an array of assessments or multiple assessments that provides consistent evidence from multiple modalities to monitor children's learning for each lesson. So you're assessing them in several different ways: checklists, anecdotal records, student work, etc. And assessment evidence will allow the candidate to determine the child's progress towards developing language and literacy. Do your assessments and the assessment strategies that you use tell you what the child's progress is, and if so, how, and how does that inform what you're going to do next? Okay, and then as you can see, there's more information for you to look over, but we're going to move on to the next video, instruction rubric 6.